At 65, Simon Cowell's life is far more complicated than the public ever imagines. To millions around the world, he is the sharp-tongued television judge, the man whose raised eyebrow or withering remark can shatter dreams in an instant. He is the media mogul, the architect behind global pop sensations, the personality whose name alone commands attention and respect. Cowell's empire spans continents, shaping the music and entertainment industry in ways few have achieved. But behind the impeccable suits, the cutting remarks, and the relentless flash of cameras lies a man whose life has been carved not only by ambition and success, but also by deep wounds, near tragedy, scandal, and the quiet, haunting moments of solitude that accompany fame. While Simon Cowell built one of the most powerful television brands in history, discovering stars who would dominate charts, sell millions of records, and become household names, the cost of that success has been steep. Once the most feared figure in the world of television, Cowell has faced scandals that questioned his integrity, accidents that nearly ended his life, and losses that left emotional scars invisible to the public eye. His story is not simply one of fame or fortune. It is a story of survival, of resilience, and of discovering meaning in a world obsessed with image, performance, and celebrity. Childhood wounds, the illusion of perfection. Simon Cowell was born in London in 1959 to Julie Cowell, a ballerina whose grace and elegance seemed to light every room she entered, and Eric Cowell, a music executive deeply embedded in the industry's glamorous circles. To an outsider, Simon's childhood appeared idyllic. A stylish home, exposure to culture, and the promise of opportunity. Yet beneath that surface, his early life was far from the fairy tale image the media might suggest. Eric Cowell was a man of success and high standards, but he rarely expressed affection. Praise was measured by accomplishments, and the simple words, "I'm proud of you," were almost never uttered. Julie, while poised and graceful, carried a cool emotional distance that left young Simon longing for warmth and reassurance. In his earliest memories, love felt conditional, linked inexorably to achievement, to the avoidance of failure, and to the invisible bar his parents seemed to set. School offered little refuge. At Radlett Preparatory School and later Dover College, Simon was not the model student. Restless and often at odds with teachers, he struggled to find his place among peers who excelled both academically and socially. That sense of invisibility, of being overlooked, misunderstood, and insufficient, took deep root. Each setback felt personal, a validation of his fear that he was never quite enough. Later in life, Cowell reflected on the haunting impact of his father's silence, admitting that it was far more impactful than any insult or criticism he might have received. Those early wounds, a combination of emotional neglect, invisible approval, and a yearning for validation, would become the engine of his ambition. They pushed him to seek recognition, power, and a position in which he could define himself on his own terms, unbound by the judgmental gaze of authority figures from his past. Breaking into the music industry. Mailroom dreams and early humiliation. Simon's first steps into the music business were anything but glamorous. Starting in the mailroom at EMI, he handled fan letters, made coffee, and observed the stars and producers who commanded the limelight pass by without acknowledgement. The humdrum work of sorting mail and performing minor tasks was a stark contrast to the world of fame and creativity he dreamed of entering. "I was invisible in a world obsessed with the spotlight," Simon would later confess. Each day in that windowless office was a reminder of how powerless and unrecognized he truly was. The sting of anonymity gnawed at him, but quitting seemed equally impossible. The rejection he faced outside the company made failure in the music industry feel like a personal defeat. Those early years were marked by quiet despair, stolen moments of tears in empty offices, whispered doubts about his potential, and the agonizing question of whether life would ever acknowledge his talents. Yet, rather than breaking him, humiliation became a teacher. Simon observed not just music but the dynamics of power, who wielded it, how it was wielded, and how one could claim it through strategy, wit, and relentless ambition. These lessons, learned in the shadows, would inform the calculated ruthlessness that defined his later career. Fanfare records, first triumphs and crushing failures. In the 1980s, Simon launched his first record label, Fanfare Records, an ambitious step into entrepreneurship. Initially, there were victories. Hits like So Macho brought parties, champagne, and the intoxicating sense of belonging. For a moment, it was a quiet whisper at first, almost imperceptible amid the applause and adoration. The joy that had once lit up the pulpit began to fade. He started noticing cracks in his enthusiasm, a waning in the intensity that once defined his sermons and performances. Questions he had never asked himself before began to surface. Is it time to step away? Am I still serving at my highest capacity? Or is it time for someone else to lead? These thoughts were terrifying for a man whose identity was so closely tied to music, ministry, and leadership. For decades, Marvin had been the one people leaned on, the voice of authority and comfort. To consider stepping down was not weakness. It was the courage to face a reality he had long ignored. The moment of clarity. The decision crystallized one Sunday morning during a service at Perfecting Church. Marvin stood at the pulpit, looking over the faces of thousands who had trusted him for decades. Each face told a story of hope, struggle, and transformation. Each person had counted on him to guide them through life's storms. And yet, in that moment, Marvin felt a disconnect. It wasn't a loss of love for his congregation, nor a loss of faith. It was a recognition that his heart was no longer fully in the work in the same way it had been. For the first time in decades, he admitted to himself that he needed to step back, not from God, not from his calling, but from the weight of expectation he carried every day. That evening, he went home and cried. Not from weakness, but from clarity. He knew what God was asking of him. It was time to pass the torch. Breaking the news. When Marvin shared his decision with his congregation, the silence was palpable. The news hit like a tidal wave. For many, it was inconceivable. This was Marvin Winans, the voice that had led them through decades of life's highs and lows, the anchor in moments of uncertainty. His words were measured, filled with love and reassurance. He emphasized that this was not an end but a transition. Perfecting Church would continue, thrive, and grow under new leadership. Marvin's legacy, he reminded them, was not about a single person or a single voice. It was about God's plan, and that plan would endure beyond him. Faith in action. Marvin's decision wasn't motivated solely by fatigue or health concerns. It was rooted in faith. For years, he had believed his path was fixed. Lead the church, sing gospel music, serve relentlessly. But faith, he realized, isn't linear. It is a journey that sometimes requires letting go of roles, titles, and responsibilities to honor a higher calling. Stepping down was, in essence, a leap of faith. It was an acknowledgement that God's work could continue through others, and that his influence did not depend on constant visibility. This decision reflected wisdom, humility, and trust, qualities Marvin had long preached but now practiced personally. The next chapter. So what lies ahead for Marvin Winans? The possibilities are vast. Music, his first love, remains a calling. With the church in capable hands, he now has space to return to the studio, record new albums, or collaborate with emerging artists. Fans are eager to hear his voice in a new season, carrying the depth of experience, emotion, and spirituality that only decades of ministry and performance can impart. Mentorship is another avenue. Marvin's decades of experience make him uniquely positioned to guide the next generation of gospel artists. Not just in technique, but in integrity, faith, and navigating the challenges of public ministry. Imagine the impact of Marvin Winans mentoring young worship leaders, helping them carry both their talent and their calling responsibly. He has also hinted at writing a book, a memoir that could chronicle not only his successes, but the trials, heartbreaks, and lessons learned along the way. Such a project would offer unparalleled insight into the inner life of a gospel titan. A story of renewal. Marvin Winans' departure is not a story of decline or failure. It is one of renewal, evolution, and courage. After decades of carrying the weight of a congregation, a family legacy, and the expectations of a global audience, Marvin chose to prioritize longevity, authenticity, and spiritual alignment over appearances or obligation. Stepping away wasn't giving up. It was an act of leadership, demonstrating that strength is sometimes found in surrender, and faith is sometimes expressed by letting go. His decision reverberates beyond the walls of Perfecting Church. It is a lesson for anyone in positions of authority. Sometimes the bravest act is to release control, trust in others, and embrace the unknown future with humility. Legacy and influence. Even as he steps back, Marvin's influence is far from diminished. His music will continue to inspire, his teachings will continue to guide, and his example will continue to model integrity and faith. He has shown that leadership is not about permanence, but impact, and that true legacy is measured not by how long you stay in one role, but by how deeply you shape those you serve. Marvin Winans' story is a testament to the power of courage, wisdom, and faith. It reminds us that even those who seem invincible are human, that even giants need rest, and that faith is not about holding on forever, but about knowing when to move forward. The lesson for us all: faith, evolution, and letting go. Marvin Winans' journey offers a deeply resonant lesson about life, faith, and the courage it takes to embrace change. Over decades, he built a legacy that few could imagine, from groundbreaking gospel music with the Winans, to founding and leading Perfecting Church in Detroit, to mentoring countless artists and congregants along the way. Yet, despite all this influence and accomplishment, Marvin reached a moment where he realized that true leadership and faith sometimes mean knowing when to step back. Life, as his story demonstrates, is not simply about holding power or maintaining visibility. Influence is fleeting. Audiences, trends, and even institutions evolve. What endures is the impact we leave through love, mentorship, guidance, and the example we set. Marvin understood that while he had shaped so many lives through his voice, his teachings, and his presence, the next chapter of his life required trust. Trust in God's plan, trust in the people he had nurtured, and trust in himself to step aside with grace. Stepping away from the pulpit, the stage, and the constant demands of leadership was not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it was an act of profound faith. It reflected the wisdom to recognize that clinging to roles out of habit, expectation, or fear diminishes the richness of both one's own life and the lives of those we serve. By letting go, Marvin made space for renewal, for new voices to rise, for fresh energy to flow, and for his own heart to realign with purpose, creativity, and rest. His example reminds us that evolution is part of the human journey. Choosing to embrace a new season, even when it means relinquishing control, is a courageous acknowledgement that life is a series of chapters, each with its own lessons, opportunities, and callings. Marvin's decision shows that true strength lies not in clinging to past achievements, but in stepping forward with faith, humility, and trust in the unseen.